Lesson 6.6 is about adding and subtracting mixed numbers, and specifically how to add and subtract mixed numbers that have different denominators. So in order to be able to add and subtract mixed numbers, you need to be able to add and subtract fractions. And if you do not remember how to find a common denominator for fractions, you need to go back and you need to look at the video for that lesson. Alright, so let's look at an example problem. Let's say we're adding the mixed numbers 1 and 4/5 plus 2 and 1/10. So, and to review, a mixed number is when you have a whole number with a fraction. So in this case, 1 is a whole number, 4/5 is a fraction, so 1 and 4/5 is a mixed number. 2 is a whole number, 1/10 is a fraction, so 2 and 1/10 is a mixed number. I'm also going to rewrite the problem vertically or up and down because a lot of students find it easier to solve problems like this when they're written up and down. Right, so the first thing that you need to do is find a common denominator for your two fractions. So we're looking at a fraction with fifths and a fraction with tenths. So the first thing you need to do is find a common denominator for fifths and tenths. A common denominator for fifths and tenths that's going to be easy to work with is tenths. So we're going to rewrite the fraction 1 and 4/5 so it has a denominator of 10. That way both fractions will have a denominator of 10. So 1 and 4/5 is equal to 1 and 8/10, right? 4/5 times 2/2 is equal to 8/10. So we can say 4/5 and 8/10 are equivalent fractions. So we're going to rewrite 1 and 4/5 as 1 and 8/10. And 2 and 1/10 already has tenths as the denominator. So now we can add 1 and 8/10 plus 2 and 1/10. So let's add the fractions. 8/10 plus 1/10 is 9/10. And 1 plus 2 is 3. So the answer we get is 3 and 9/10. So 1 and 4/5 plus 2 and 1/10 is equal to 3 and 9/10. You do want to check to see if your answer is written in simplest form. It doesn't have to be, but that just makes your fraction or your mixed number easier to think about. And 3 and 9/10 is in simplest form. So now let's look at a problem that we will need to change the answer to simplest form. All right, this time let's look at 4 and 5/6 minus 2 and 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite the problem vertically. You don't have to, it's just helpful for a lot of students. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to find a common denominator for sixths and fourths. So you would go through the process of, you would list out multiples of 6 and multiples of 4 until you find a number that they have in common. So a common denominator for sixths and fourths could be 12ths, could be 24ths. I'm going to go with 24ths just so you can see how we simplify the problem at the end. So I'm going to rewrite these mixed numbers so that they have 24 as a denominator. All right, so I'm going to change 5/6 so that it has 24 as a denominator. So I know 6 times 4 is 24, so I multiply by 4/4. So 5/6 is equal to 20 24ths. So 4 and 5/6 is equal to 4 and 20 24ths. And I'm going to rewrite 2 and 3/4 so that it has 24 as a denominator. So I want to change 3/4 into 24ths. So I know 4 times 6 is 24. If I multiply the denominator by 6, I multiply the numerator by 6. So 3/4 is equal to 18/24. So 2 3/4 is equal to 2 and 18/24. Get rid of this. So again, you can rewatch the video about how to find common denominators if you need more practice with that. Alright, so now I have 4 and 20/24 minus 2 and 18/24. I'm going to subtract my fractions. 20/24 minus 18/24 is equal to 2/24. And 4 minus 2 is equal to 2. So the answer we get is 2 and 2/24. So saying 2 and 2/24 is perfectly fine, or you can write it in simplest form. 2/24 is equal to 1/12, right? Because if we take 2/24 and divide by 2 halves, because 2 halves is equal to 1, we get 1/12. So we can say the answer is 2 and 2/24, or we can say the answer is 2 and 1/12. And let's look at one more example. All right, let's add 2 and 3/4 plus 3 and 3/10. And I'm going to rewrite the problem vertically. Again, you don't have to, but a lot of students find it helpful. So the first thing I want to do is rewrite each mixed number so the fractions have common denominators. So a common denominator for 4ths and 10ths is going to be 20ths. So I'm going to rewrite 2 and 3/4 as 2 and 15/20. And I'm going to rewrite 3 and 3/10 as 3 and 6/20. And we're going to add those together. So add the fractions first. 15/20 plus 6/20 is 21/20. And 2 plus 3 is 5. So we can say the answer is 5 and 21/20. The only weird thing about this answer is that 21/20 is an improper fraction. The numerator 21 is larger than the denominator of 20. So it's kind of weird to say 5 and 21/20. It's weird to have a mixed number that also has an improper fraction. So we're going to rewrite this so that it's in simplest form. I know that 21/20 is the same thing as 1 whole and 1 extra 20th. Right? It's like 20/20 plus 1 extra 20th. So 21/20 is equal to 1 and 1/20. So we now have to take this 5 and add it to 1 and 1/20, right? Because this is the same as this. So altogether, 5 and 21/20 is the same thing as 6 and 1/20, right? 5 plus 1 is 6, and then we still have this 1/20. So the answer to this whole problem is 6 and 1/20. Let's look at one final example where you have to simplify the answer. 5 and 3/4 plus 1 and 1/3. Alright, so we have 5 and 3/4 plus 1 and 1/3. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to rewrite the fractions so they have a common denominator. So I need a common denominator for 4ths and 1/3. So a common denominator for 4ths and 1/3 is 12ths. So 5 and 3/4 is equal to 5 and 9/12. And 1 and 1/3 is equal to 1 and 4/12. Again, if you need practice finding common denominators, go back and look at that video. All right, so 9/12 plus 4/12 is 13/12. And 5 plus 1 is 6. So the answer I get is 6 and 13/12. Again, this is weird because 13/12 is an improper fraction. The numerator is larger than the denominator, and it's weird to have an improper fraction as part of a mixed number. So I'm going to rewrite this. I know that 13/12 is equal to 1 1/12. So 13/12 is equal to 1 1/12. We need to combine. That's my 2-year-old son in the background. We need to combine the 6 and the 1 1/12 because 13/12 is equal to 1 1/12. So when we put that together, we find that 6 and 13/12 is equal to 7 and 1/12. So the final answer to the problem is 7 and 1/12.